Director Riley.
Yeah.
So I've started the webinar. So just give me a couple of seconds here while I work with Mr. Stolt.
Okay. There. Good.
So Mr. Stolt is joined in to the webinar, and I'll just go ahead and promote him to a panelist now.
Okay.
And then we could begin.
Okay, I will start the meeting, call the meeting to order, the Waters Planning Committee of the Water Management District on May the 3rd at 4 p.m. So we have 3 committee members present, so we are in, we're legal. Without having the roll call, Director Paul, Director Adams, and myself are present. Can we open up and see if there are any public comments of any kind?
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on items that are not on today's agenda, please use the raise hand feature on Zoom, or if you're calling in, please dial *9. So let me go check the attendee side of things, and let me see if anybody would like to make public comment at this time. Chair Riley, there's no members of the public who wish to make public comment at this time.
Thank you, and I just want to, if there are any public members present, raise your hand, and if you have some comment to make anytime, we will try to make room for that, even though there's a formality about all that. Okay, we'll bring it back to the board. The only action item is for the minutes of April the 5th meeting. Does anybody have any comments or make a motion? Member of the committee?
I could make a motion to approve the minutes from April 5th, 2021.
Oh, sorry. I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the minutes of prior meeting on April 5th. Roll call, please, Joel.
Yes, Director Paul,
Yes.
Director Adams,
Aye.
Chair Riley.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously on a vote of 3-0.
Thank you. The next category of items are discussion items. Dave, I'm going to throw it to you for bringing us up to speed.
Yeah, Joel, would you move Maureen over to panelist?
Let me take care of that.
Yep. So a little bit of an update on Pure Water Monterey. We just concluded the month of April with 308 acre feet injected, which is pretty spot on with how we did in March, which was, I think, 311 or 313 acre feet. So we continue to kind of hit the mark that we've set for ourselves. Obviously, if it was a full year going forward, we would exceed the 3,500 acre feet. Keeping in mind that February is a shorter month, so we won't always get 300 based on how we're doing right now. Maureen, have you been moved over? Yep, I see you there. Can you update us on the well drilling for deep injection well 3 and deep injection well 4?
Sure. Deep injection well 3 has been constructed, and the initial development, which is basically just done by jetting air out into the formation to loosen up those fines that develop during the drilling process, that initial development is completed. On Friday, they moved what we call the big rig that can drill these 1,000-foot deep, 34-inch wide holes. They moved that rig from DIW3 to DIW4, which is right by the perk pond. They're going to install the pump in DIW3, and they began that effort today in order to start the pump development, and then we'll move into pump testing, which is when we really see what DIW3 may be able to do. Probably on the same day, and start DIW4. Things moving along. Waiting for both.
Internet.
Yeah, your connection kind of dropped out a little bit there, Maureen.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Anything that needs to be, I know you can't know if it needs to be repeated, but is
Could you-
there
Could you
something you'd
repeat
like
what
to hear?
what you just said at the end, the last little bit?
Sure, they will. As soon as we get the holes free of the pumps and the drill rigs, we'll start hooking up the electrical and the pipe and get them ready for startup.
And can you give us a target for completing DI3 and then a target for DI4 again?
The current target for DI3 is November and DI4 is February of next year. We're currently working on a schedule update. As we finish the construction of DIW3, now's a good time to update the schedule. Contractors working on that as we speak.
Good.
Yeah, it's all going kind of swimmingly well right now. So, you know, we do bi-weekly calls with Monterey One Water and the whole operations crew. And I won't say it's getting boring, but it's pretty straightforward. The project is, it's just, there's no surprises right now. So it's a good place to be. Pretty happy with it.
Yeah, no surprises. That's good.
Yep. Okay. So I think that's about all we have to update on. I know that Suresh will be working on billing for April. CalAm individual from New Jersey tends to ask at the first of every month what the injection rate looks like, and I haven't seen that email today, so he's asleep at the switch, I guess. But we're ready to go with that. I've already updated Suresh with the April numbers, so he's in a position to start the billing. So that's it for the
Let me
report
back
on
up a
Pure Water
second.
Monterey.
The billing side, so there's not been a payment yet. Is that what you're saying? And it's due?
Oh, just for April. So we tend to bill around the 10th or 15th of the month. And so we've been billing and collecting pretty regularly now since, we started company deliveries, company water in September. So it's all tracking. They're a little bit, maybe 45-day pay. But we're in that process where we bill about the 15th and then we get paid roughly the end of the following month. So it's all working.
Well, it's working. That's my main interest.
Yeah, we just walked through with Monterey One Water and CalAm the estimates for next year's company water rate, which is part of the budget process. So, and I think I saw Ian was on, and they will prepare to do an advice letter filing for the new rate here in the next several weeks. So.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Okay, I'm a little slow on making notes as I'm going along here for myself. Let's proceed to item 3. And I want to just remind the public that if there's any public comment of any kind, please raise your hand. We'll recognize
Dr. Riley, I believe Melody Chrislock would like to make public
Okay.
comment.
Okay.
Melody, I'm not sure if you want to make public comment on this item here, on the update on Pure Water Monterey. So I'll go ahead and unmute you. And before you begin your public comment, let me go ahead and share my screen here.
I just have a quick question.
Okay.
How much is the monthly bill for the Pure Water Monterey water, and what did you mean by new rates?
Yeah, I guess through the chair, I can answer that.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So let's just do some quick mathematics here. Yeah, so typical monthly bill is a little over $700,000. and the company water rate is reset annually. We wrote an agreement that's based on fiscal year, which is kind of a pain because really the water flows on a water year basis and we kind of count it on a water year basis. But as part of each annual fiscal budget process, we then look at what the expected costs are going to be for the then next current fiscal year. So this is for fiscal 21-22. And we also do a true up based on expected final numbers for the current fiscal year. So as chemicals go up or energy goes up or down relative to what the budget was, then we'll make an adjustment inside the water rate for the following year to either recover costs that weren't in the company water rate or to refund budgeted costs that didn't come in as high. So we, true it up either higher or lower, depending on those things. And so it's, it's energy, it's labor, it's chemicals, a whole variety of the operations and maintenance line items, including some of the administrative overhead for Monterey One Water's operations and internal costs of borrowing and the state revolving fund fixed costs and, a whole variety of things go into it. I think we are seeing some increases in expected energy costs for the next fiscal year. So the company water rate will be going up. And so, we, the district, pay Monterey One Water that, and then we bill Cal-Am kind of on a pass-through basis. However, when we put water into the reserve, which we will do again this fiscal year, we pay for that with no offsetting revenue stream. So that's our expense. We have an additional 750 acre feet that we need to get into the reserve really over the next 2.5 years. So, and that, that'll just be an expense of the district.
Was that it, Melody? You have more follow-up or not? I do.
Yeah, that's fine.
Will Monterey One also have some annual or periodic adjustments on their side?
Yeah, so they only get to adjust once a year. And we've tried to make that point abundantly clear. I think that Fred, their CFO, has expressed an interest in doing another true up partway through the next fiscal year. And we told them that there's not really a mechanism to do so. We're expecting all or portion of that $19 million federal grant money to come in. And so that can be used to pay some principal on the loan, which will help reduce the water cost and so forth. So there may be some things that happen during the fiscal year that, makes use of that money. But as of right now, it's supposed to happen just once. You set it and forget it. It's like Ronco, once a year, you just set the company water rate, and that's it for the year.
And my other question, though, Dave, has to do with the amount that Cal-Am buys, which is sometimes less than the actual amount of water that was delivered. And you say that's on our side, the district side. But I want to know, how is that accounted for? How do we maintain some awareness that exists? And I'm thinking about Water Master, and maybe it flows into the next subject matter. I'm just explain a little bit of that process.
Yeah, we track. So you see John Lear's on the line. So he prepares a report for the Water Master, allocating the extractions. And then Suresh and I prepare a report monthly that deals with the injection. And so we track what's injected in the month, how much goes to the operating reserve, and how much goes to the drought reserve, which is currently 0 because the County Water Resources Agency folks have not yet committed to being in or out of the project. So we're not doing anything with the drought reserve. Through August 31st, every drop that went into the ground was deemed to be operating reserve. So from February of last year through the end of August of last year, we, the district paid for all that water. And it's just over 1,000 acre feet that sits in the operating reserve. And then on a monthly basis, we treat all the water delivered as company water, as a delivery to Cal-Am. So whether they pull it out of the ground in that month or the next month or not, they will be billed for it. But then we also, in conjunction with the quarterly water budget process, we're keeping an eye on the water accounting so that the goal is by the end of the year, the end of both the water year and the end of the fiscal year, that the amounts all kind of true up. It is possible from time to time that the company will take, well, they have taken some water that we had not yet delivered, if you will. But at the end of the year, the water accounting will all work out. And, you know, we just, as I said, through the quarterly water budget cycle and the monthly reporting, we can kind of keep track of where we are so that, you know, we don't inadvertently allow Cal-Am to use more water than was delivered, so to speak, because that would be tapping into the operating reserve. But it's all working.
Yeah, these are evolving issues, I think, and we'll just try to get our heads around, you know,
Yeah.
pieces of this as we go along. I'm prepared to move to item 3, which is the Seaside Groundwater Basin, which relates to some of this, unless any of the committee members have other questions on the Pure Water Monterey project, phase 1. Okay. All right, let's move on to the next one, Dave. Thanks.
Yeah, let's move along. This is mostly informational and for discussion to maybe identify some places we want to go in the future. There's been a series of issues that have been brought up basically by you, Director Riley, since your tenure with the Water Master began. I've included several reports or pages, all of which end up in their annual report. But some of the questions that have been raised deal with the unit cost calculations for the annual replenishment assessment. Those assessment calculations themselves, how the proxy projects are identified and factored. So I just wanted to open it up. You know, Exhibit 3A is the unit cost calculation. I know there was a question there. With the, so each year we look, you know, the Water Master looks at proxy projects and what the cost per acre foot is. You can see on the third page of the Exhibit A how that was done this current year. And, you know, some of the sources are actually us. But nevertheless, you know, regional desal was looked at. Pure Water Monterey, that 2,442 is the actual base cost. That's the company water rate this current fiscal year. But then there's the combined, you know, weighted cost, I guess you would call it, for groundwater replenishment and desal. And then Seaside Basin and RUAP. And I guess some question has come to, well, kind of threefold. One is,
Can I slow you down, Dave, just a moment? Karen, I think you wanted probably some graph shown or something. Is that right?
Oh, not necessarily, but I want to understand the blended unit cost and why that is done that way. Why do you have a blended unit cost?
a reasonable question. And footnote 3 tells you how it was calculated. These, yeah, these are, maybe John, you can weigh in, but these are just some of the longstanding water master formulas. I mean, this is what they've been doing.
Yeah, Dave, I believe there is components of the decision that describe this process. Now, how you interpret the components of the decision and turn them into math equations, that could have some discussion around it probably.
Yeah.
So this is the court decision
Right.
Well,
in the water adjudication case. Is that what you're referring to, John?
Yes, there is a replenishment cost that is associated with paying these replenishment costs, and the method that, let's just say that if you go through the decision and you make math problems out of all of the components of the decision that describe how to calculate, they're not internally consistent. So there's some room in there for interpretation.
So the water master has to basically do something that, despite the inconsistencies in the decision.
right.
So what purpose does it serve, though, the blended unit cost?
Yeah. So
I guess I'm asking because we have real costs and prices for some components of, for the aquifer storage and recovery, for pure water, for a couple of the other things, but we don't, the desal plant hasn't been built, so those aren't current costs. What's the effect of how is this blended unit cost used? What's it used for?
Right. So if you,
I have a partial understanding, but I'm not satisfied with it.
Well, if I could just jump in a minute, Karen, I'm glad you're asking the question. That's along the lines I've been asking questions now for the past couple of months. And I'm not particularly satisfied that I'm getting the attention of the full board nor the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, on some of the questions. And in fact, I asked to attend a Technical Advisory Committee meeting recently in order to discuss a little bit about one of these formulas. And I was told the TAC doesn't do that. They do supply issues and other related matters. I've gone back now to read some of the history, and the court allowed the TAC to set the rate for the reimbursement formula. And so the TAC absolutely has a role in this because the court deferred to them to develop it. The court didn't specify it. The court did specify that Cal-Am has a right to claim that their investment in other water sources has an advantage to the credit they should get for trying to address the overdraft of the basin. And so that expense in the Cal-Am's expense in other projects were related back and incorporated in and so on. That does not explain why they merged two, or like you said, the merged calculation for expense.
Yeah.
Doesn't explain why they do that. And that's kind of my question is, why are they continuing to do that? Because it doesn't make any sense to me anymore. It may have then, but it doesn't anymore.
So Dave, if I may, I have a little history on that.
Yeah.
There, the thought, I believe that the thought is not knowing which project is going to be built. You flow weight them so that it's an average of any of the projects that may actually end up being built. But you make a good point now that you know some of them are actually built and operating. Is it still appropriate? Because I think this methodology was developed when they were all on the horizon coming. So.
Yeah, and actually the math is a little twisted in that, and you can see it at the kind of the last paragraph of the text in Exhibit 3A. So basically they're taking the blended or flow weighted Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project cost plus the ASR cost plus the RUAP cost and then dividing by 3. And so desal and pure water are flow weighted together in that 4,817 number. but ASR is not and RUAP is not. And what's interesting, of course, is the RUAP number is somewhat questionable, given that that project doesn't really exist. And so, you know, as I look to the footnotes, footnote 4, yeah, provided by MCWD. So, you know, they provided a number, but again, the project doesn't actually exist. And it's been converted somewhat in that the RUAP pipelines, or the arterial pipelines, are basically taking pure water Monterey water. That's what the plan is going to be. And so RUAP water actually is pure water Monterey water, but the capital assets are slightly different in that, you know, they won't be using the injection wells and recovering from the Seaside Basin. So there's pieces of the project that they would not have any expense for. But then there's other pieces of the project that they will be on the hook for. You know, their portion of the capital related to pure water Monterey for the base case. So, you know, again, it's footnoted as coming from MCWD, but there's some question in my mind. You know, philosophically, the idea is the parties that have overdrafted need to have a calculated replenishment assessment. And if you could actually go out and buy water, then supposedly that's what you'd be paying for the water that you're using to replenish. In this case, because like in Cal-Am's instance, they get to offset their replenishment assessment with investment in a water project. So in Exhibit 3B, you can see that for the most recent water year, they used 2,872 was the number for the natural safe yield calculation, and then $718 for the other calculation.
So Cal-Am gets to offset its replenishment assessment by investments it's making in the new water supply, even if that water supply has not come online.
Correct. And so that's what Exhibit 3C is all about. That's actually lifted from the adjudication. It's buried way in the back.
Yeah, no, I've
Yeah.
looked at these. So are these, some of these numbers more or less a proxy for the price of the water? You know, it's on the market, so I can't say the market price, but maybe cost-based price.
Right, that's the intent. And so, you know, in order to determine what the replenishment penalty should be, they have to come up with some form of a cost of water. And that's what that unit cost calculation is. It's just, Director Riley's rightly pointed out that it's just kind of an odd calculation. And I tend to agree. You know, it's, you know, at a most fundamental level, it would be probably appropriate to say, if I could replenish, what would I replenish with? Well, I'd replenish with either excess capacity in Pure Water Monterey expansion or desal, but it's very unlikely you'd replenish with ASR. I mean, we're trying to get to a point where ASR operates on a, you know, on an annual basis, operates more like a reservoir behind a dam, but there's never going to be additional ASR water available to do actual replenishment. So why is ASR in the calculation? It doesn't really make any sense to me personally as a, you know, as a water planner. Same thing with RUAP, because I'm not even sure what the RUAP project is at this point. You know, originally it was a Marina Coast project for their own wastewater, and they were going to build their own backbone infrastructure. And they discovered that doing a pipeline on their own simply for their own recycling of their rights to their wastewater was going to be so cost prohibitive that they chose not to do that. And so then they decided to participate in Pure Water Monterey. So, you know, is RUAP even a legitimate proxy to be included? I probably put forward that it's not, and it doesn't produce any surplus water that could be used for replenishment. So at the end of the day, I think really, you know, this would be a conversation to have with the water master, but you know, the replenishment assessments should probably be simply based on supplies that can produce an excess for which you could purchase water to do actual replenishment, which would be only desal and Pure Water Monterey expansion. I mean, it's a subject area for future conversation, I think. But as I've told some of you before, you know, this is the way they've been doing it every year. And so it's just, you know, and it's a very short-staffed entity. So it's just very easy to just dust off what they did last year and update it and do it again this year.
And at some point, Dave, and maybe this drifts into the next item on our agenda, at some point, the district, I think, needs to clarify, at least for the board, what role we have in relation to the Seaside Groundwater Basin, because you have the water master that's sitting with fundamental jurisdiction about its health, but then we have fundamental jurisdiction over health too, health of water, you know. Supply.
Right.
So at some point we may have to go down a road of sorting some of this stuff out, and I'm not saying we're there yet.
Yeah.
What I'm particularly interested in, by the way, on the proxy items and so on, is let's get the math right. If we can get the math right, then we can have something more substantive to talk about. And it goes, Karen, to your point about if Pure Water Monterey Phase 1, we have the real numbers for those, and that's an actual water supply in place. Why are we blending the rates with a desal that's just hypothetical at this point? Why are we doing that?
And what's the consequence of doing that?
Yeah, I know. I think I know the consequence. Consequence is it brings the price down so that Cal-Am gets a better calculation in the formula. And so whatever investment it makes somewhere else, which is desal, it goes farther.
It gets a bigger offset because the price is calculated partly based on desal, right?
Right, but with the blended formula, their dollars, their Cal-Am dollars goes farther. Mm-hmm. Because it's a lower number, and therefore their dollars go farther. And anyway, it's just trying to get the math right and trying to get the understanding that what is it that we're trying to measure. I think where we started out, but where the water master started out, it was okay because everything was hypothetical. Now we have some real facts to work with, and so let's clean up some of the calculations based on real numbers that we know. And then it goes back to about, you can't just pay more for ASR because it's not a money problem. So you can't plan around just paying for more just because it's a lower cost water supply.
Right.
Money doesn't help you.
Right. Well, I too would like to understand what is the role of the district in these water master questions. What you know, if we think there are some, let's say the calculations should be calculated differently, can we go about requesting that the water master consider a different calculation? What's our role?
Yeah, and I think that's pretty much what it would come down to. You know, they will do what they want to do. But we can make a suggestion. We are a sitting member of the Water Master Board. But, you know, Cal-Am has most of the votes. This one, I think it goes through Budget and Finance. So it's, you know, it is reviewed annually. But you've nailed it in that the practical effect is by including ASR and RUAP and giving them each a third of the total, you dilute down the replenishment assessment based on the lower cost of two projects that don't really produce any water for long-term replenishment. So it's, obviously, if ASR was running like the way it's supposed to, in other words, if we went through multiple years, multiple hydrologic cycles, you would be building up a base, and that base would have the impact of providing protective water levels, if you will, or replenishing the basin until such time as you have a 4-year, 5-year drought and you need to go access it. So, there is some potential benefit for replenishment of ASR sitting there as a giant reservoir. It's no guarantee. It's not done specifically to replenish. And so, I think our role would be to say, we've spent time looking at this and it just doesn't seem appropriate to be using those two supply sources as, the diluent on the replenishment assessment, because it really does, it brings it down.
Well, I kind of have my, I'm calling my marching orders, not exactly, but as a representative on the Water Master, I'll be pushing these issues. And there is a meeting this week on Wednesday. So I'll be seeing where some of that goes. I would, unless there's more questions about this, I know there's a lot to be clarified and a lot to, I think, needs to be changed in order to make the picture clearer. Right now, it doesn't, what they do does not make a clear picture. What the Water Master does not make a clear picture. And that's my that's my goal. Short term.
I share that wish to understand all of this better, the consequences of calculating it this way, and who benefits and who pays more because of it, and so on.
Yeah, well, these are good questions. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Mary.
I hope that if we do have a study session about the Water Master, that we invite Bob Jakes to it. Because he's the one who has actually done the calculations and such. And I think I think it would be the appropriate thing to do.
I'd like to again remind the public, if they have a question or comment, please raise your hand so we know about it. I'd like to go to the next item on the agenda, which again picks up on, well, not exactly. No, well, go ahead. Next item is the expansion.
Yeah, so the question's been raised about whether the expansion can proceed without a water purchase agreement with Cal-Am. And, I think the short answer is yes, but there's a number of things that would have to happen. But the longer answer is we really, if expansion is the project that could and should move forward, it's really there to serve as a long-term replacement water supply. And so it should go with Cal-Am. And Cal-Am has expressed an interest, at least on an interim basis, to open up the water purchase agreement. We think without the expansion, we can certainly add another several hundred acre feet per year of deliveries based on the advanced water purification facility. So certainly we'll look at that. Their appetite for doing the expansion at the expense of the desal plant isn't fundamentally out there yet. I've heard some discussion about the need for both projects. But what I did want to highlight is we have been doing some thinking about it. We've actually had some conversations and so forth. And I guess I should say too, that the Monterey One Water, they don't have a loan commitment, but EPA has a placeholder for them at 38 million. So it's kind of a, I just call it a placeholder. And EPA's extended that out first to, to May 30th. And then they just moved it from May 30th now out to the end of the current calendar year. So if in fact the project were to come online, only a portion of it's covered by the WIFIA program through the EPA. That's just for the facility itself, Advanced Water Purification Facility. When we first scoped this out, we had 2 new extraction wells put in. There were also some new injection wells. I think at this point we're down to considering just 1 additional injection well. But nevertheless, just keep it in mind that it's a $60 to $70 million project, not a $38 million project. And there are some facilities that very likely Cal-Am as the water retailer would prefer to own, extraction facilities and rate basin. So the public portion and the private portion, hasn't been worked out. So, just keep all that in mind. But even if we had to do it all as a publicly financed project, we could do it using a combination of the WIFIA loan and then the district's own revenue raising capability. But we've come up with 5 scenarios where it could be financed. 2 of them involve Cal-Am. And the very first one that you see here is termed similar to the existing water purchase agreement. So the existing water purchase agreement says, if you deliver us 3,500 acre feet, we will pay for 3,500 acre feet per year. So, in this case, Cal-Am could enter into a water purchase agreement for the full 2,250 acre feet of capacity. What you're going to find is that would be excess capacity in the early years because there isn't offsetting demand to use that water. So Cal-Am would be faced with banking it, paying for it, banking it, and having it available for future use. The second nuance is a take or pay contract. And basically in this particular instance, Cal-Am would commit to all the fixed costs of financing, but only take as much water as they want to take. So if they project out and they say, well, this is what we think we're going to have an incremental increase in demand for this year, we, Cal-Am, want 75 acre feet next year. And then the following year, maybe another 75 on top of that. So they would try to follow the demand up as the demand occurs, but they would always have to pay the fixed costs of financing. And that's not unusual. You see take or pay contracts all the time in both the public power area as well as the public water area. And in fact, the regional desal plant, God rest its soul, had a take or pay contract. And when we came back around with Pure Water Monterey, the company was a bit suspicious of entering into another take or pay contract. And they said, no, we prefer a contract that has minimum delivery amounts and the company would only pay for the water it receives. A little bit different approach. But then, we've looked at some alternatives, and one is just a water purchase agreement with the district. And the district would then, we'd be in a position to only sell to Cal-Am what Cal-Am wants in a given year. I think, the goal would be to have it dispatched or annually committed in advance. So, the company would say, this coming year, give us 500 acre feet, in the subsequent year, 550, and year after that, something. And then we, the district, would be covering all the fixed costs, also building up a drought reserve, or what I've called an ASR reserve, to backstop it until we get through more hydrologic cycles. We could sell to others, like Marina Coast Water District or Seaside's municipal system. The risk of this scenario is that if Cal-Am continues down its path of developing a desal project, then you may in fact be paying for similar water twice. And I'm not sure that's a burden that the district wants to impose on ratepayers. Nevertheless, we could do it using the security of our water supply charge and user fee. The fourth is, a joint water purchase agreement. And before Keith Vandermountain left, we actually looked at several scenarios where Marina Coast Water District, didn't really need water for delivery today, but they know in 10 years from now, they're going to need it. And it's an increasing demand. They have more growth prospects than the Calam main system does, just because of raw land. And so we looked at we actually modeled it and looked at putting water in the ground with the excess capacity of Pure Water Monterey, and then hitting a certain point where you start taking water out of the ground to meet demand, both here in the Calam service area as well as Marina Coast service area. And they'd be willing to pay for the storage, and we'd be willing to pay for the storage, similar to scenario 3. And then finally, there's been all this discussion about protective water levels. I've viewed it skeptically as a little bit of a red herring. I think that Paul Bruno's letter as chair of the Water Master to the Coastal Commission citing protective water levels was more designed to create a new need that hadn't been discussed before than really to solve a problem. I mean, there's no infrastructure that's been discussed. It'd be far more effective to do protective water levels near the coast, but that would require new injection wells and piping that has never been discussed. How to pay for it's never really been discussed. But nevertheless, if the Water Master could come up with a way to pay for protective water levels or just basic replenishment, then that would be a way to finance the expansion. And of course, that's cheaper water than desal. So if you were going to enter into replenishment or protective water levels, you'd very likely want the cheaper water as your source. So, but I think, we'd have to discuss who's benefited by protective water levels, who's benefited by replenishments, what role they should have in paying for all of that. And, none of that's been discussed. And so it would create the revenue stream that you need to secure financing to build the project. But I think it would take some time to really sort out who's going to be the payer to cover it. But all of these are not just pipe dreams. I mean, they all make sense. They're all doable. My only caution is, if we went down a path that said, all right, the district's going to build this thing anyway, and then we didn't use it to offset the unlawful diversions on the river, and it didn't become a permanent water supply, then we better have a darn good reason for what we're going to do with the water from it. It's all I can offer there.
Okay, well, one small piece of this that I don't understand is this is about building the expansion, why certain assets associated with the expansion are going to be owned by Cal-Am.
Right.
Why is that? And rate-based, if it's a project of, joint partnership between the two public agencies?
Right. So if Cal-Am were to become more reliant on water that's produced in the north and shipped to the south, additional extraction capacity is going to be needed, and some additional pipelines and so forth. So our project currently gets the water into the ground, but we don't have any extraction capacity in Pure Water Monterey base case. Now, we did build ASR, and we do use the ASR well as an extraction point. So in some sense, there is a publicly owned production well. But typically, the wells, all the seaside wells are Cal-Am wells. And so when this was originally envisioned, back in 2018, yeah, there was, the public side would do the public, do we need any more conveyance capacity? No, we can put the water in the existing pipeline that's, public, but it's Marina Coast Water District. So we would need additional injection wells that we would own, and the advanced water purification facility expansion, which the public would own. But yeah, we just considered extraction wells just like all other Cal-Am owned production wells. But certainly, yeah, the public parties could develop those.
Currently, Cal-Am doesn't operate those wells, correct? It's Monterey One Water that does?
So they operate the injection wells. And so the points of extraction,
They meaning who?
Monterey One Water, and Marine, our utility player. But yeah, so they're running those, and the Pure Water Monterey water is extracted from ASR well number 3, which is a Cal-Am well, ASR well number 1, which is currently getting rehabbed, but it'll be back online, I don't know, in a couple months, I guess, a month maybe. Yeah, John's nodding. That's our well, but they can also deem Pure Water Monterey recovery from any other of the wells. And I think, John, your monthly reports to the Water Masters have actually deemed it having been extracted from like Peralta and Lucerne and some of the other Cal-Am wells. Is that right?
Yeah, yes, that's correct. In the quarterly water budget process, we will identify on a monthly basis the amount of water to be extracted. Then Cal-Am will extract water and total it on a daily basis. And on a daily basis, Cal-Am will determine how much of the water that was extracted out of the Seaside groundwater basin was what type of water, whether it's Pure Water Monterey, native, or ASR. That is decided by the quarterly water budget group, which comes through the main board. And then at the end of the day, when I get that report, I go and add up each piece of each well. And it's usually everything that was pumped out of the basin from every well that was running that day. And then to touch back to one of Director Paul's questions, the full project of Pure Water Monterey expansion will have 4 extraction wells. 2 extraction wells were put into the SEIR. There are 2 additional extraction wells that are in the EIR for the water project, which is Cal-Am's water project, and they were meant to be ASR 5 and 6. They would be constructed underneath the environmental work by Cal-Am as extraction wells for the Pure Water Monterey expansion. So there already is kind of some division in the planning of the project.
Thank you, John and Dave.
I have two directions I'm kind of just want to raise here a little bit. One is if the district is the major investor in this project, I think we have a leadership role in pushing. I'm pleased with the letter that we sent to the PUC. There's some allies to that letter, I believe, but I don't know where that stands. It's been too recent to know, bank on much of that right now. But I'm glad to see that. My caution is that to the extent that we have given thought, or you, Dave, and your group has given thought to 5 different options, I'm a little afraid to push those options out in much serious discussion until Cal-Am has a chance to kind of deal with their issues with the Coastal Commission, their future, whatever it is.
Right.
On the other hand, I don't think delay is in anybody's benefit. So how do we balance kind of the waiting to see what they might do compared to what we would prefer to do or prefer to see, I should say. I don't know that we're going to do it all, but anyway, question.
That's a great question. And I think that, we will have more discussion with the company here within the next month, which may reveal some things. I'm not crystal clear on what the Coastal Commission schedule is. And Judge Villarreal's ruling relative to the county permits, I'm not sure where that's leading. So we just have an information gap right now, I think, that we need to spend some time with the company talking.
Well, and I guess my main caution on this subject we're talking about right now is it makes it look like the district has many funding options, but we're going to depend on so many other parties to make any of that work. I just don't want to get too far out on a limb on this one, even though I want everybody to know we're thinking about it, and
Right.
We have options.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly it. I mean, we have the financial wherewithal to secure debt and fund this project. The question is, why would we? And I'm not sure we've got a definitive answer to that, because we're not, there's a certain beauty to putting water in the ground for drought reserve. That does make some sense to have a ready bank that you can rely on. But once you do that, what do you do for the next 20 years? Yeah, so it's something that is not to be taken lightly. And so, if we were in a position to sell and the company or Seaside Muni or Marina Coast all wanted a little piece of it, well, then there's another reason to possibly do it. So.
Well, and just for everybody's information, so far the Water Master has no financing plans of any kind. So the fact that they may be mentioned here, that's really a long shot crapshoot option. So, but they all do. I think they all have some long shot, odds related to them. So we'll just have to see how that goes. I'm sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Well, there's talk of money that could come, both federal and state level money to develop recycled water projects. Now, I don't know if that money is going to materialize either level, but it seems like it's a possibility at least. It's some of it would be for this kind of project, I think, too. Yeah. So if that became possible, that could, that could really help.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Well, and keep in mind, we did the base project with not just the state revolving fund loan, but Prop 1 monies, both stormwater as well as recycled water grant monies, and then the 19 million of federal money was also based on recycling. And so as they do another round of funding, we'll try to get in line for that, even to the extent that we can take it backwards to the previous project, which is really what we're going to be doing with the 19 million when it comes in. But yeah, we're trying to stay on top of those.
Good. There isn't an obvious way to fund replenishing depleted aquifers when the water won't be taken out for 10, 20, 30 years. It seems like that's a type of thing that should be, funded socially, not just immediately by the users of the water.
Right, and that's really the issue with number 5 here, which is who are the benefited parties.
Mm-hmm.
We did have a conversation with Bob Jakes Monterey One Water, Cal-Am, and ourselves. And we, the district, are really the only one who's in a position to, come up with a levy. We have authority, and we kind of oversee the whole resource system. And so if there was a public good to just replenishing water to the Seaside Basin, then we could step in front of that. But you really have to have that discussion. I don't think it's something that the district, solely as the district, would say, let's go do this thing. It would be, we need to protect this resource. Who benefits from it? And then if it's all the ratepayers because it serves potable supply for the Cal-Am system, that's one thing. But what do we do with respect to DBO, who's an alternate producer, or McIntosh, who's got rights, the Laguna Seca Golf Ranch. There are folks who benefit from water coming from the basin that would ostensibly benefit from protective water levels, who are not the ratepayers of Cal-Am and are not necessarily our direct constituents. And so, yeah, that's where I just think that there's a whole can of worms waiting to be dealt with, if this was something people wanted to do.
Well, and to call it a can of worms is a big caution flag. But I think the can of worms really rests more with the water master than it does with the district. Would that be a fair statement?
Yes, absolutely. And, this whole idea of coming up with replenishment supply, since the water master's been put into place, there's not been any real progress on permanent replenishment sources. And, we're heading into this 25-year period where Cal-Am will do in-lieu recharge, but in-lieu recharge suggests that the normal remains normal. And if we head into a mode of climate change,
yeah,
and decreased precipitation, then are you really recharging in lieu if there's no new precipitation, or if you're at 70% of normal for an extended period of time? So the only way to replenish the basin is to not pump it or to add water to it. And neither of those have happened yet. I mean, yeah, not pumping has happened with the triennial step downs. So, they're heading in a direction, but,
It's still depleted. It still
Yeah.
needs, how much does it need to be, restored? Does anybody know?
yeah, I think,
well, I would caution you on giving a definitive answer on that, because there's an understanding that there's a capacity of the entire basin, which is one number, and how much is protection is another level, another number, and what are the real water options are just another completely unknown. So I think the less specificity we have these days, the better we are, because then we're not held accountable.
Right. Yeah, total usable storage space in the entire basin is 52,000 acre feet. But what the deficit is, I don't know. Off the top of my head, I do not know.
Well,
And
I guess
oh,
at
go
this
ahead.
point, I'd be interested to know what Supervisor Adams and Director Riley, whether you think this would be useful now to have a public discussion of this at a board meeting, or whether we should wait for the moment.
My preference would be to wait for a little bit. Let's try to get the math kind of agreed to. And so we're talking real numbers, not hypothetical numbers, and see what the water master does with that, see what Bob Jakes thinks about it, see if the TAC wants to kind of weigh in on some point of view. But I think also the database that exists for the water master does not make it easy to understand the overdraft volumes that each pumper has responsibility for. And so that information is kind of tucked away. You got to do some math in order to figure it out. Why not just put the numbers out there so we can understand it? That's only a piece of the picture. And the other question is, what's the water master going to do about it? And until they, seems to me, get the math right, and then see what options they see in their jurisdiction. I don't even know, Dave. I'm just a question. Could they float a bond? Could they go to a referendum of any kind? I don't know that they have that authority.
Yeah, I don't think they have that authority. They're not truly a public agency.
Yeah. Which is another, I don't know if it's a problem or not, but it's definitely an issue.
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, it's, I would say it's a problem. I mean, they know that, oh, I mean, they've asked the question. Bob Jakes has asked the question, who could raise money if we had to?
Well, I think, Mary, you're going to be at the meeting on Wednesday. I just want to have some of this discussion with them to see if they're interested in kind of clarifying some things or going down a few avenues just to kind of get a better understanding of everything. I'm not looking for solutions or answers or options at this point. I'm just trying to get the math right, and then see where that goes.
Is there anything on the agenda that will deal with this subject?
I don't think,
haven't
I
seen
looked
it.
at the agenda, nothing stood out at me. I'm going to have to force it in somewhere. Well, I'm going to go ask if there's any member of the public would like to comment or add anything on this subject before we close out.
Yes, so if you would like to make public comment on item number 4, funding concepts for Pure Water Monterey, please raise your hand. If you are calling in, please dial *9. Director Riley, I do not see anybody at this time that wishes to make public comment on item number 4.
Okay, so before we close, does anybody have any other comments on this this subject?
Not on this one.
Committee? Okay, so our last item is future items. I'm going to want this to come back at some point, but not right away. So we'll talk about it later. Any other topics?
What about a presentation on the Monterey Subbasin groundwater sustainability planning work that's going on in the Corrada Tierra management area? I think that might be interesting, and I think that we could get some marvelous people to speak to it. The chair of it happens to be someone I know well named Sarah Hargrave. And I believe that John Lear has been working quite closely with her on these issues. So it might be something that would be helpful for us to really kind of see where the future lies with the Snohomish Valley Basin groundwater sustainability work.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Does that sound okay, Dave?
Noted. Yep.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, if there are no other suggestions on future topics, unless there's a last comment.
Looks like, does Dave Laredo have his hand up?
That was operator error.
Maureen looks like she has her hand up.
No, she does not.
I think we're all set.
Okay, sometimes, Mary, when your cursor sits somewhere, it'll turn into a hand. At least mine does.
I didn't know that. I haven't.
So you might
that
have a
hasn't
hand
happened to
sitting
me yet.
somewhere because your cursor, that's where your cursor is.
Oh, thank you very much for that. I'll make sure I pay attention to that in the future.
Oh, yes, I see what you mean. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, we'll adjourn this committee meeting. Thank everyone for being here and participating and attending.
Thanks to all of you.
Thank you. I'll see some of you on Wednesday.
It was a good discussion. This was really good, Dave. Thanks for all the work.
Thank you.
All right.
Perfect. Thanks, everybody.
Till
Thank
next
you.
time. Bye-bye.
Bye.